They said humanity died with Earth. The Galactic Council recorded it in their archives. Species 7. Alpha terminated due to stellar collapse, no survivors detected. For 300 years, the universe moved on without them, their legends fading into whispered tales told by the oldest races around, dying campfires on distant worlds. But legends have a way of refusing to stay dead. Commander Zara Chen had been drifting in the void between stars for longer than most civilizations had existed, her ship's experimental stasis field keeping her suspended between life and death. She was the last ghost of a dead world, a final echo of humanity's defiant roar against the dying of the light. The universe had written her obituary, but nobody had bothered to tell her she was supposed to be gone. Now, as alien fleets gather at the edge of known space to witness something impossible, they're about to learn the most dangerous truth in the galaxy. When you think you've seen the last of humanity, that's usually when they surprise you the most. Some silences are just waiting for the right moment to break. The emergency beacon pierced through 3 centuries of cosmic silence like a knife through black velvet. Captain Thexvar of the Calaxian research vessel Wandering Scholar nearly choked on his morning nutrition paste when the alert screamed through the bridge. His 4 eyes widened as data flooded across the holographic displays, each reading more impossible than the last. The beacon's signature was ancient, predating the current galactic calendar by several hundred years, yet its energy output suggested it was very much active. "Scan again," Thexvar ordered, his translator struggling with the mix of disbelief and excitement in his voice. There must be an error in the dating protocols. His science officer, a crystalline being named Velphara, whose body chimed softly as she moved, manipulated the sensor array with practiced precision. Her melodic voice carried notes of confusion as she spoke. "No error, Captain. The beacon is broadcasting on frequencies that were declared extinct after the human exodus. The signal strength indicates proximity of approximately 7 light minutes." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle humming of life support systems and the occasional chime from Velphara's movements. Every crew member understood the implications. Humans had been declared extinct when their homeworld, Earth, was consumed by their expanding sun. The few colony ships that had escaped were lost to the void, their fates unknown but presumed tragic. The Galactic Council had spent decades searching for survivors, but found nothing except empty space and the occasional piece of debris. "Could it be a trap?" asked the tactical officer, a reptilian Sauron whose scales shifted from green to yellow when stressed. "The marauder fleets are known to use ancient signals as bait." Thexvar considered this possibility while studying the readings. The marauders were pirates who preyed on research vessels and merchant ships, but their technology was crude and brutal. This signal was something else entirely, sophisticated in a way that spoke of desperation rather than deception. "Unlikely. The encryption patterns are too complex for pirate technology." This signal would require intimate knowledge of human communication protocols that died with their civilization. The captain made his decision with the weight of scientific curiosity overriding caution. Set course for the beacon's origin. Alert the Council to our position and intentions. If we're about to make first contact with human survivors, the galaxy needs to know. As the Wandering Scholar adjusted its trajectory and engaged its faster-than-light drives, none of the crew could imagine what they were about to discover. In the cold depths of space, something that should not exist was waiting for them with infinite patience. The journey took 8 hours, during which the bridge crew took turns speculating about what they might find. The scientific literature on humans was extensive but outdated, filled with observations from brief contact periods before their star's instability forced the species into desperate exodus. They were described as remarkably adaptable bipeds, with an unusual capacity for both cooperation and conflict. Their technology had been impressive but not extraordinary by galactic standards, though they showed a troubling tendency toward innovation during crisis situations. That made other species nervous. What made them truly unique was their psychological profile. Humans were one of the few species that seemed to thrive on challenge rather than avoid it. While most intelligent life sought stability and predictability, humans appeared to be motivated by the unknown and the impossible. This trait had made them excellent explorers and terrible enemies depending on circumstances. When the wandering scholar finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the crew expected to find debris, perhaps the remains of an ancient colony ship broadcasting a final automated message. Instead, their sensors detected something that defied explanation. Floating in the darkness between two red dwarf stars was a ship unlike anything in current galactic databases. Its design was clearly human in origin, but it had been modified with technology that shouldn't exist. Energy readings suggested it was powered by a controlled singularity, a theoretical power source that most species considered too dangerous to attempt. The hull appeared to be composed of matter that bent light around itself, creating a shimmering effect that made it difficult to focus on directly. Life signs? Thexvar asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer would be complicated. Velthar's chimes became more discordant as she struggled with the readings. Uncertain, Captain. The ship is surrounded by some kind of temporal distortion field. Our sensors detect one life form in what appears to be suspended animation, but the readings are inconsistent with known biology. Distortion? The captain's translator conveyed his shock clearly. That's impossible. Temporal manipulation requires energy outputs that would destroy any ship attempting to generate them. Nevertheless, Captain, the readings are unmistakable. Time is moving differently around that vessel. Based on the distortion patterns, I estimate that 1 hour inside the field equals approximately 3 years in normal spacetime. The implications hit the crew like a physical blow. If this was accurate, whoever was aboard that ship had experienced only days or weeks while centuries passed in the outside universe. They weren't just survivors, they were time travelers, conscious refugees from a dead world who had somehow cheated death itself. Exvar stood from his command chair, his 4 eyes fixed on the impossible vessel displayed on their main screen. Open a communication channel. Use the old human diplomatic frequencies. The communications officer, a tentacled being whose species had mastered quantum entanglement messaging, worked frantically at their console. Channel open, Captain, but I'm detecting massive interference from the temporal field. Any message we send will be severely distorted. Do it anyway. If there's a human aboard that ship, they deserve to know they're no longer alone. The message that went out was simple, transmitted in the mathematical language that served as a universal basis for interspecies communication. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Thexvar of the Calaxian research ship Wandering Scholar. We have received your beacon and wish to offer assistance. Please respond if you can understand this message. For several minutes, nothing happened. The alien ship continued its silent drift between the two stars, its temporal field creating ripples in spacetime that made the surrounding vacuum shimmer like heat distortion. Then, slowly, almost hesitantly, a response came through the interference. The voice was human, female, and carried the weight of centuries in its tone, despite being filtered through multiple translation matrices. This is Commander Zara Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel Endurance. I wasn't sure anyone was left out there to receive signals anymore. How long has it been? The bridge crew exchanged glances. How do you tell someone that their entire species has been declared extinct? How do you explain that they become a legend, a cautionary tale told to young beings about the fragility of life in an uncaring universe? Thexvar chose honesty, knowing that lies would only delay the inevitable grief. Commander Chen, this is a difficult conversation to have across space. Our records indicate that Earth was destroyed approximately 312 years ago. You are the first human we have encountered in that time. We believed your species to be extinct. The silence that followed lasted so long that the crew began to wonder if the communication link had failed. When Commander Chen's voice returned, it was steady but carried undertones that the translator couldn't quite capture. 312 years. That's longer than I calculated. The temporal field was supposed to maintain a ratio of approximately 1 to 50, not 1 to several thousand. Commander, if I may ask, how have you survived? Our understanding of human biology suggests that even in suspended animation, your life support systems should have failed decades ago. Another pause. This one shorter but somehow more weighted. The field doesn't just slow time, Captain. It slows everything. Aging, metabolic processes, even decay. I've been conscious for most of it, watching the stars move in slow motion, thinking about home, and wondering if anyone would ever come looking for survivors. I stopped counting days after the first year. The concept of remaining conscious for centuries, even in slowed time, was horrifying to contemplate. Most species that attempted temporal manipulation did so with complete stasis, unconsciousness being preferred to the psychological strain of extended temporal displacement. The fact that a human had endured such isolation while remaining sane suggested mental resilience that bordered on the impossible. Commander, we would like to bring you aboard our vessel, if you're willing. The Galactic Council will want to know about your survival, and you'll need medical attention after such extended isolation. Galactic Council? The surprise in Chen's voice was evident even through the translation matrix. When I left Earth, humans had barely made contact with 3 other species. How many are there now? The current council represents 47 distinct civilizations across this galaxy, with observer status granted to 12 others. The universe has become much smaller since your time, Commander. The temporal field around the human ship began to fluctuate, energy readings spiking as systems that had remained stable for centuries started to change. I'm shutting down the field. Chen's voice came through with increasing clarity as the temporal distortion faded. Fair warning, the Endurance is going to look pretty rough. 3 centuries of cosmic radiation exposure, even slowed down, tends to leave marks. As the shimmering distortion collapsed, the human vessel became fully visible for the first time. It was indeed scarred by its long journey, its hull pitted and darkened by radiation exposure, but it remained intact and apparently functional. More importantly, it was moving under its own power, adjusting position to match the wandering scholar's trajectory. Requesting permission to dock, Chen's voice was now crystal clear, carrying notes of exhaustion and hope in equal measure. I'd like to see what the universe has become in my absence. Thexvar looked around his bridge, seeing the same mixture of excitement and apprehension in every face that he felt in his own chest. They were about to welcome aboard the last survivor of a supposedly extinct species, someone who had witnessed the death of her homeworld and somehow found the will to continue existing for 3 centuries of solitude. The psychological profile that would emerge from studying her experience would revolutionize understanding of sentient resilience and adaptation. Permission granted, Commander. Dock with our port airlock. Be advised, our atmosphere is compatible with human physiology, but our gravity is approximately 30% higher than Earth's standard. Copy that. Beginning docking approach. And Captain, thank you for not leaving me out here alone anymore. As the 2 ships slowly maneuvered together in the space between dying stars, Thexvar couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would be remembered as significant by future historians. The discovery of a human survivor would change everything, not just in terms of xenobiology and temporal physics, but in how the galaxy understood concepts of persistence and hope. If one human could survive the impossible for 3 centuries, what else might be possible? The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk that echoed through both ships. After a few minutes of atmospheric equalization, the airlock doors cycled open and Commander Zara Chen stepped aboard the Wandering Scholar to become the first human to set foot on an alien vessel in over 300 years. She was tall by galactic standards, approximately 2 meters in height, with dark skin that showed the subtle effects of long-term radiation exposure, and black hair streaked with premature gray. Her clothing was a form-fitting environmental suit designed for extended wear, clearly modified and patched countless times over the centuries. But it was her eyes that captured the crew's attention, dark brown orbs that held depths of experience no one else in the galaxy could claim. Captain Thexvar, I assume? Her voice carried an accent that linguistic databases would later identify as a blend of several Earth regional dialects, probably the result of her ship's crew coming from diverse geographical origins. Commander Zara Chen, Earth Defense Force, last commanding officer of the UES Endurance. Thank you for responding to my beacon. Thexvar stepped forward, his movements careful and respectful. Commander Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council and the crew of this vessel, welcome back to the Galaxy of the Living. We have many questions, but first, do you require medical attention? Chen's smile was tired but genuine. I've run full diagnostics on myself more times than I can count. Physically, I'm as healthy as someone who's been in temporal suspension for subjective months can be. Mentally, she paused, looking around at the alien faces surrounding her. Mentally, I'm just grateful to have company again. 300 years is a long time to be alone with your thoughts, even when time is moving slowly. If you don't mind my asking, Velthara interjected, her crystalline form chiming softly as she moved closer. How many others were aboard your vessel? Our sensors detected only one life sign. Chen's expression darkened, pain flickering across her features before being firmly suppressed. The Endurance launched with a crew of 237. We were the last ship to leave Earth's system before the sun went nova. Our mission was to find a suitable world for colonization and establish a new human settlement. She paused, gathering strength. One by one, they chose to enter permanent stasis rather than endure the journey. Equipment failures, psychological pressure, the sheer hopelessness of flying through empty space with no destination. I ordered the temporal field activated when we were down to just me, hoping to preserve what was left until help could arrive. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this information. The idea of losing an entire crew to despair was tragic enough, but the courage required to continue alone for centuries was beyond their comprehension. This human had lost everything, her world, her species, her crew, and yet she had persevered. Commander, Thexvar said carefully, I need to inform you that according to our records, all human colony expeditions were lost during the evacuation. You may be the only survivor of your entire species. Chen nodded slowly, as if she had already considered this possibility during her long vigil. I suspected as much when no rescue ships arrived. The temporal field was always a desperate gamble, a way to buy time and hope that someone would eventually detect our beacon. I just never imagined it would be aliens who found me. The galaxy has changed significantly since your departure, the captain continued. Humans are remembered but as a cautionary tale about stellar instability and the importance of early evacuation protocols. Your survival will shock the scientific community and likely trigger significant political discussions about the rights of extinct species. Extinct species rights? Chen's eyebrows rose with what might have been amusement. That's a conversation I never expected to be part of. What exactly does that mean? Legal standing for representatives of civilizations that no longer exist, explained the ship's cultural liaison, an avian being whose feathers shifted color as they spoke. Several species have gone extinct since the formation of the Galactic Council, but none left survivors. You represent a unique situation in interstellar law. Chen looked around the bridge again, taking in the alien technology and unfamiliar faces. I suppose I'll have a lot to learn about how things work now. 3 centuries is apparently long enough for the universe to become a very different place. Commander, Thexvar said, with your permission, I'd like to arrange immediate transport to the Council chambers on Nexus Station. Your arrival will require careful handling, both diplomatically and scientifically. The implications of your survival extend far beyond simple rescue operations. I understand, Captain, but before we leave, I'd like to retrieve some items from the Endurance, personal effects, data cores, anything that might help preserve human culture and history. If I really am the last of my species, then I'm also the last keeper of our collective memory. The weight of that responsibility was staggering to contemplate. This single individual carried within her mind the last authentic knowledge of an entire civilization, their customs, their achievements, their failures and triumphs. She was a living museum, a bridge between the dead past and an uncertain future. Of course, Thexvar replied. Take whatever time you need. The galaxy has waited 3 centuries to meet you again. A few more hours won't matter. As Commander Chen prepared to return to her ship one final time, the crew of the Wandering Scholar began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The resurrection of the dead, the return of legends to reality, the proof that sometimes hope could survive even the most impossible circumstances. They had found her in Stillness, drifting alone between dying stars. Now, she would be joined by the galaxy itself as it struggled to understand what her survival meant for everyone. The age of humans was supposed to be over, but legends have their own way of deciding when it's time to return from the grave. And in the depths of space, where impossible things sometimes happen just often enough to keep hope alive, the first human to speak to aliens in 3 centuries began planning for a future no one had thought possible. The journey to Nexus Station took 3 days, during which Commander Chen became the most studied individual in recent galactic history. Scientists from 12 different species conducted remote interviews through subspace communication, their questions ranging from basic physiological data to complex philosophical inquiries about human nature and culture. Chen answered them all with remarkable patience, though the crew of the Wandering Scholar noticed the exhaustion building behind her eyes. Dr. Velthara had taken unofficial responsibility for Chen's well-being, her crystalline nature allowing her to detect stress patterns in human biorhythms that others might miss. During the second day of their journey, she found Chen in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the stars with an expression that spoke of profound loneliness. "The questions trouble you," Veltara observed, her melodic voice carrying harmonics of concern. Chen turned from the viewport, offering a tired smile. Not the questions themselves, but what they represent. Everyone wants to understand humans as a species, but they're asking someone who's been out of touch with her own people for 3 centuries. I was a military officer, not an anthropologist or philosopher. I'm probably the worst possible representative of human culture. Perhaps that makes you the best possible representative, Velthara suggested, her form chiming softly as she moved closer. Academic knowledge can be sterile, removed from lived experience. You carry within you the authentic human response to impossible circumstances. That is more valuable than any scholarly analysis. Chen laughed, but there was little humor in the sound. The authentic human response to impossible circumstances seems to be stubborn refusal to accept death gracefully. I'm not sure that's the legacy my species would want remembered. Is that how you see your survival? As stubbornness? The question seemed to catch Chen off guard. She was quiet for several moments, considering her answer while watching distant stars wheel slowly past the viewport. I suppose it was, in a way. Every rational analysis suggested that activating the temporal field was suicide with extra steps. The power requirements should have burned out our reactor within weeks. The psychological stress of extended conscious suspension should have driven me insane within months. The probability of anyone finding us in the vast emptiness between stars was essentially 0. Yet you activated it anyway. Yet I activated it anyway, Chen agreed, because the alternative was accepting that humanity died with Earth, and I wasn't ready to be the one who closed that final chapter. Maybe that's what we were, in the end. A species too stubborn to know when to quit, too hopeful to accept the inevitable. Veltara's harmonics shifted to something that might have been admiration. My people have studied many civilizations that faced extinction. Most accept their fate with dignity and grace, using their final moments to create beautiful art or philosophical treatises that will outlast them. Very few choose to rage against the dying of the light, as human literature might phrase it. And now you're wondering if that makes us admirable or pathetic. I'm wondering if it makes you necessary. Chen turned to face the crystalline being fully, intrigued by something in her tone. Necessary for what? The galaxy has become comfortable, Velthara explained carefully. The Galactic Council maintains peace through careful consensus building and risk avoidance. We have eliminated most sources of conflict by eliminating most sources of change. It is stable, predictable, and increasingly stagnant. Perhaps we need a species that doesn't know when to quit. Before Chen could respond, Captain Thexvar's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Commander Chen, please report to the bridge. We're receiving priority signals from Nexus Station. They found the bridge crew clustered around communication displays, their expressions ranging from excitement to concern. Thexvar looked up as Chen approached, his 4 eyes reflecting something that might have been apprehension. Commander, the situation at Nexus Station has become complicated. Word of your survival has spread throughout Council space faster than we anticipated. There are currently representatives from 36 different species requesting immediate audience with you, 7 different research institutions demanding access to your ship and its technology, and at least 3 separate political factions claiming that your existence validates their competing theories about extinction protocols. Shan absorbed this information with the stoic expression of someone who had endured 3 centuries of solitude. I take it this means my arrival won't be the quiet diplomatic meeting you originally planned? Furthermore, Thexvar continued, there's a developing crisis that may directly involve you. The Hegemon Empire, which controls approximately 15% of known space, has declared that as the sole survivor of an extinct species, you have no legal standing under current galactic law. They're demanding that you be turned over to them for protective custody and cultural preservation. Protective custody? Chen's voice carried dangerous undertones that reminded everyone present that she was first and foremost a military officer. What exactly does that mean? The ship's cultural liaison, whose feathers had turned a nervous shade of orange, stepped forward to explain. The hegemony follows a philosophy they call guided evolution. They believe that extinct or dying species should be preserved under their supervision for the good of galactic stability. In practice, this means individuals like yourself would become essentially living museum pieces, studied and protected but not permitted independent action. Chen's laugh was sharp and entirely without humor. So I survived 3 centuries alone in space just to become an exhibit in an alien zoo? That's not happening. Unfortunately, Thexvar said carefully, the legal situation is complex. As the last representative of a species not currently recognized by the Galactic Council, your status under interstellar law is unclear. The hegemony's claim has some precedential support. What kind of precedent? Dr. Valtara's chimes became more discordant as she accessed historical databases. 17 cases in the last millennium where the final survivors of extinct civilizations were placed under protective custody. In each case, the individuals lived comfortable but restricted lives while their cultures were documented and preserved. They were never permitted to leave designated facilities or make independent decisions about their own futures. Chan moved to the main display, studying the approaching bulk of Nexus Station. It was massive even by galactic standards, an artificial world built around a captured asteroid and expanded over centuries into a city-sized diplomatic complex. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species moved in carefully orchestrated traffic patterns around the station, their diversity a testament to the scope of galactic civilization. Captain, I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If I board that station, am I going to be able to leave it again? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Thexvar looked around his bridge, noting the uncomfortable expressions on his crew's faces. Commander, I honestly don't know. The political situation is developing faster than anyone anticipated. There are forces at work here that extend far beyond simple first contact protocols. Then we have a problem, Chen said quietly. Because I didn't survive 3 centuries of isolation just to spend whatever time I have left as someone else's pet human, if the Galactic Council wants to meet me, they can do it on equal terms or not at all. Commander, the captain said carefully, you should understand that defying the hegemony could have serious consequences for everyone involved. They have significant military assets and aren't known for accepting diplomatic defeats gracefully. Chen turned from the display, her expression showing the steel that had kept her functioning through centuries of solitude. Captain, let me tell you something about humans that your databases probably don't mention. We have a saying, give me liberty or give me death. It means we'd rather die free than live as slaves, even comfortable ones. If that attitude is what made us extinct, then at least we died as ourselves. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this declaration. The concept of preferring death to comfortable captivity was alien to most galactic species, who generally valued survival above all other considerations. But there was something in Chen's tone that spoke of absolute conviction, a line beyond which she would not be pushed. There may be alternatives, Beltara said suddenly, her form brightening as she accessed new information. I'm detecting unusual activity around the station. Multiple ships from the Frontier Coalition have arrived in the last few hours, and they're taking defensive positions. The Frontier Coalition? Chen asked. Independent worlds and species that operate outside Council authority, Thexvar explained. They reject the consensus-based approach of the main galactic government in favor of more individualistic solutions. They've been looking for ways to challenge the hegemony's interpretation of extinction protocols. Chen's eyes lit up with interest, and they see me as an opportunity to do exactly that. Potentially. The Coalition believes in self-determination for all sentient beings, regardless of species status. If they're willing to support your independence claim, it could force a legal review of the entire extinction protocol system. At the cost of starting a political crisis that could destabilize the entire galaxy, Thexvar added grimly. Chen studied the tactical display, watching the complex dance of ships around Nexus Station. The Coalition vessels were indeed taking what looked like defensive positions, while hegemony forces were responding with their own military formations. The situation was balanced on a knife's edge, waiting for something to tip it toward either negotiation or conflict. Captain, I need to ask you and your crew to make a choice. You can deliver me to the station as planned and let the politicians sort out my fate, or you can help me contact the Coalition directly and see if there's another option. I won't ask you to take sides in galactic politics for someone you've known for 3 days. The Calaxian captain looked around his bridge, reading the expressions of his crew. What he saw there surprised him. Instead of concern or uncertainty, he found determination and something that might have been inspiration. This humans' refusal to accept captivity, even comfortable captivity, had touched something in them that they hadn't realized existed. Commander, Thexvar said slowly, the Wandering Scholar is a research vessel, not a warship. We can't protect you from military action, but we can certainly arrange for you to speak directly with Coalition representatives before any other parties become involved. Chen's smile was the first genuinely warm expression the crew had seen from her since her rescue. Thank you, Captain. I know this puts you at risk, and I won't forget that you were willing to take that risk for a stranger. Perhaps we're not taking it for a stranger, Belthara observed, her chimes taking on harmonics that suggested deep thought. Perhaps we're taking it for the principle you represent, the right to determine one's own fate, regardless of circumstances. As the Wandering Scholar adjusted course to rendezvous with a Coalition vessel on the outskirts of the Nexus system, Chen found herself thinking about the ironies of her situation. She had spent 3 centuries alone, preserving herself in hope of eventual rescue. Now that rescue had arrived, she discovered that freedom was not automatically granted with survival. The galaxy that had evolved during her absence was more complex and politically fractured than the universe she remembered. But complexity brought opportunity. If she could navigate the political currents successfully, she might not only secure her own freedom, but potentially change how the galaxy treated the concept of extinction itself. It was a challenge worthy of a species that had never learned when to quit. The Coalition vessel Defiant Hope was sleek and predatory, designed for speed and maneuverability rather than the diplomatic elegance of council ships. Its captain, a reptilian being whose scales shifted color with emotional state, welcomed Chen aboard with the enthusiasm of someone greeting a legendary figure come to life. Commander Chen, the captain said, their translator conveying both respect and excitement, Your survival represents hope for every species that refuses to bow to the false safety of consensus politics. We offer you sanctuary and the resources to fight for your independence. Chen studied the coalition crew, noting their diversity and the military precision of their movements. These were not politicians or diplomats, but warriors and pioneers, beings who had chosen the dangerous freedom of the frontier over the safe predictability of the core worlds. In many ways, they reminded her of the best aspects of humanity's pioneering spirit. Captain Seth, I appreciate your offer, but I need to understand what you're asking of me in return. Nothing in galactic politics is ever free. Seth's scales shifted to colors that the translator interpreted as amusement and approval. Direct and practical, I see why humans were respected as negotiators. You're right, of course. We want you to challenge the extinction protocols in the council courts. Your case could establish precedent that would protect other endangered species from hegemony preservation programs. And if I lose, then you fight anyway, because freedom without the willingness to defend it is just a comfortable form of slavery. Chen looked around the bridge of the coalition vessel, seeing faces from half a dozen species united by a common commitment to independence. It was a vision of what the galaxy could become if diversity was embraced rather than managed, if individual determination was valued over collective security. All right, Captain. Let's see if one stubborn human can teach the galaxy that extinction isn't always permanent. As the Defiant Hope set course for Nexus Station with Coalition escorts, Chen realized that her long journey between the stars was finally nearing its end. But the real adventure, the fight to establish her right to exist as a free being rather than a preserved specimen, the galaxy was about to learn that when humans said they refused to go quietly into the night, they meant it with the sort of determination that could reshape the political landscape of entire civilizations. The age of human extinction was ending, not with resurrection, but with the recognition that some things are too important to die, even when all hope seems lost. Behind them, the wandering scholar followed at a discreet distance, its crew having made their choice to stand with freedom rather than safety. In the depths of space, where legends were born and impossible things occasionally happened, the last human was no longer alone. She was joined by allies who understood that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to surrender, no matter what the odds or how long the fight might take. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest legacy wasn't their technology or their art, but their absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. Nexus Station's Grand Assembly Hall had never witnessed anything quite like the chaos that erupted when Commander Zara Chen entered the chamber flanked by coalition escorts. Representatives from 47 species filled the amphitheater-style seating, their varied forms creating a rainbow of alien life united only in their intense curiosity about the impossible figure standing at the speaker's podium. Chen wore the dress uniform she had retrieved from the Endurance, its Earth Defense Force insignia, polished to gleaming perfection despite 3 centuries of storage. The symbolic weight of those insignia was not lost on the assembled delegates. They represented not just a military rank, but the authority of an entire extinct civilization being brought before the galactic community for judgment. High Counselor Vaxstern, a tall being whose elongated limbs and translucent skin marked them as one of the ancient ethereal species, called for order with a voice that carried harmonics capable of penetrating even the most excited conversations. This emergency session of the Galactic Council is now in session. We are gathered to address the unprecedented situation of Commander Zara Chen, who claims to be the last surviving representative of the extinct human species. Claims? Chen's voice carried clearly through the chamber without amplification, trained through decades of command to project authority. High Counselor, I am not claiming to be human. I am human. The question before this assembly is not my identity, but my right to exist as a free being rather than a museum piece. A ripple of discussion moved through the chamber like wind through grass. Most species had developed careful protocols for addressing disputes through intermediaries and formal procedures. Direct challenge to authority was uncommon enough to be shocking. The hegemony delegation, seated in a place of honor near the High Counselor's position, was led by an imposing figure whose cybernetic enhancements gleamed against charcoal gray skin. Warlord Krexthal stood with the fluid grace of a predator, their voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction when they spoke. High Counselor, this individual's identity is irrelevant to the central issue. The precedent is clear and has been upheld 17 times in the past millennium. The final survivor of an extinct species falls under protective custody protocols to preserve their cultural heritage for future study. The emotional state of the subject is secondary to the greater good of galactic knowledge preservation. Chen turned to face the hegemony delegation directly, her movement sharp and military precise. Warlord, with respect, I am not a subject to be studied. I am a sentient being with the same rights to self-determination that every other person in this chamber enjoys. If you want to preserve human culture, I suggest you start by respecting the human principle that freedom is more valuable than safety. Principles of extinct species hold no weight in current galactic law. Krexthal replied smoothly, You are a remnant of the past, valuable precisely because you represent something that no longer exists. Your preservation serves the greater good of all current civilizations. The coalition delegation rose as one, their captain Seth stepping forward to address the chamber. High Counselor, we formally challenge the hegemony's interpretation of extinction protocols. Commander Chen's survival demonstrates that human civilization is not extinct but merely displaced. As such, she retains all rights accorded to representatives of sovereign species. This triggered immediate chaos. The legal implications of declaring an extinct species to be merely displaced would affect not just Chen's case but the status of preserved artifacts, territories, and resources that had been redistributed after various species extinctions. The economic ramifications alone would be staggering. High Counselor Vaxtern employed their species' natural harmonic abilities to restore order, the subsonic frequencies compelling attention through biological compulsion rather than mere courtesy. The question of species status is indeed complex. However, precedent suggests that a single survivor cannot constitute a viable civilization under current definitions. Then perhaps current definitions need to be revised, said a new voice from the observer galleries. Dr. Quintala, the galaxy's foremost expert on extinction events, moved to the center of the chamber with the careful precision of someone accustomed to being the smartest individual in any room. Her insectoid features were difficult for most species to read, but her reputation preceded her. Dr. Quintala, the High Counselor acknowledged with evident surprise, you are not scheduled to address this assembly. Nor was I scheduled to witness the potential redefinition of extinction as a legal concept, Quintala replied, her mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Commander Chen's case represents a unique opportunity to examine our assumptions about survival, adaptation, and the nature of civilization itself. Chen watched this exchange with growing understanding. The debate was no longer really about her individual fate, but about fundamental questions of law, philosophy, and politics that affected every species in the galaxy. Her survival had become a catalyst for discussions that had been brewing beneath the surface for decades. Dr. Quintala, Chen interjected, what is your professional opinion about the viability of a single survivor civilization? The expert turned her compound eyes toward Chen, studying her with the intensity of someone examining a fascinating specimen. Commander, in my professional opinion, you represent something that has never existed before in recorded galactic history. You are not merely a survivor but a bridge between extinct and existing civilizations. Your technological achievements alone, particularly the temporal field generator, suggest innovation capabilities that exceed those of your original species. Explain, demanded Warlord Krexthal. The temporal manipulation technology demonstrated by the Endurance is approximately 300 years ahead of anything in current galactic databases, Quintala explained. This suggests that extreme survival pressure stimulated technological advancement beyond what human civilization achieved during its normal development period. Commander Chen has not merely preserved human culture, she has advanced it, The implications of this statement hit the chamber like a shockwave. If Chen represented an evolved form of human civilization rather than a simple remnant, the legal and political calculations changed dramatically. Advanced civilizations were accorded respect and autonomy under galactic law, regardless of their size or recent history. Chen felt a surge of understanding as pieces fell into place. Her modifications to the Endurance's systems, born of desperate necessity during her long vigil, had indeed pushed human technology beyond anything Earth had achieved. She wasn't just the last human, she was potentially the first of something new. Dr. Quantala raises interesting points. Chen said carefully, but I want to be clear about something. I'm not asking for recognition as an advanced civilization or claiming technological superiority. I'm asking for recognition as a free individual with the right to determine my own fate. Nothing more, nothing less. Unfortunately, High Counselor Vaxtern observed, individual rights cannot be separated from species classification in galactic law. Your status as a person depends entirely on your status as a representative of a recognized civilization. Then perhaps it's time to change galactic law, said Captain Seth from the Coalition delegation. The principle of individual sapient rights should supersede bureaucratic classifications. This suggestion triggered another wave of heated discussion. Separating individual rights from species recognition would fundamentally alter the basis of galactic law, which had been built around the concept of civilizations as the primary units of political recognition. The philosophical and practical implications would take decades to fully understand. Warlord Krextul seized the moment of uncertainty. High Counselor, this debate demonstrates exactly why protective custody protocols exist. Complex questions of law and philosophy cannot be resolved in emergency sessions. Commander Chen should be placed in protective custody pending a full legal review, which could take several years to complete. Years? Chen's voice carried dangerous undertones. You want to lock me away for years while you debate whether I have the right to exist freely? The hegemony offers comfortable accommodation and full access to educational resources about galactic civilization. You would be well cared for and could contribute to cultural preservation efforts during the review period. Chen's laugh was sharp and entirely without humor. You're offering me a luxurious prison and calling it protection. That's not happening. You may not have a choice, Krexthul replied coldly. Station security forces are prepared to enforce council decisions. The threat was barely veiled, but it had the opposite effect that the warlord intended. Instead of intimidating Chen, it triggered something that 3 centuries of solitude had honed to a razor's edge: absolute determination to remain free. Warlord, Chen said quietly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent chamber. Let me tell you something about humans that your databases might not mention. We have a concept called going down fighting. It means that if we can't win, we at least make victory so costly for our enemies that they regret starting the fight. She turned to address the full assembly, her words chosen for maximum impact. I didn't survive 3 centuries alone in space just to become someone's pet human. If this council decides to imprison me against my will, I will resist with every resource at my disposal. That includes the temporal manipulation technology, the modified reactor systems, and 300 years of accumulated knowledge about survival under impossible conditions. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Chen possessed technology that could potentially be weaponized and the determination to use it if forced into a corner. The political calculations suddenly became much more complex. Dr. Quintala stepped forward again, her insectoid features somehow conveying urgency. High Counselor, I formally request permission to propose an alternative solution. Granted. Commander Chen's technological achievements suggest she has already evolved beyond the baseline human parameters. Rather than debating the status of an extinct species, perhaps we should consider recognizing her as the founder of a new one. The legal precedent for evolutionary speciation already exists in galactic law. The chamber fell completely silent as delegates processed this radical suggestion. Creating new species classifications was possible but extremely rare, requiring extensive evidence of significant biological or technological divergence from parent species, but the precedent did exist. That's High Counselor Vaxtern paused, consulting legal databases through neural interface, actually within established parameters, though it would require extensive evaluation. Evaluation I'm willing to undergo, Chen said immediately, provided it takes place under conditions of freedom rather than captivity. I propose a compromise, temporary protected status as a candidate for new species recognition, with full movement and association rights pending the completion of formal evaluation. Warlord Krexthel's cybernetic enhancements whirred as they processed the implications. This proposal circumvents established protective custody protocols and sets dangerous precedent for future extinction events. It also recognizes the principle that evolution doesn't end with extinction, Captain Seth countered. The coalition supports Dr. Quintala's proposal. High Counselor Vaxtern looked around the chamber, reading the complex mix of confusion, excitement, and apprehension in the assembled delegates. This decision requires formal voting procedures. The Council will recess for 1 hour to allow consultation with home governments. As the delegates filed out in small groups, intense discussions already beginning, Chen found herself surrounded by coalition representatives and several independent observers who wanted to understand her position better, but her attention was drawn to Dr. Quintala, who approached with the careful movements of someone bearing important information. "Commander," the expert said quietly, "there's something you should know about the evaluation process. It's not just a legal formality. If you're recognized as a new species, you'll have the right to establish territorial claims, form alliances, and make decisions that affect galactic politics. The hegemony opposes this because they understand you won't be an isolated curiosity, but a potential catalyst for significant change." Chen considered this carefully. "Dr. Quintala, what do you think I represent? Not legally, but actually. Honestly, I think you represent proof that civilization is more adaptable than we assumed. Your survival suggests that extinction is not always permanent, that determination and innovation can overcome seemingly impossible odds. If that's true, it changes how we understand the nature of life itself." As Chen prepared for the resumed session that would determine her fate, she realized that her long journey between the stars had led to something she never expected: the opportunity to fundamentally change how the galaxy understood survival, adaptation, and the indomitable will to continue existing against all odds. The vote would determine not just her freedom, but the precedent for how the galaxy treated the concept of extinction itself. In a universe where most species accepted their fate with dignity when facing impossible odds, one stubborn human was about to prove that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to surrender, no matter how long the fight takes or how unlikely success might seem. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest gift to the universe wasn't their technology or their culture, but their absolute conviction that nothing was ever truly impossible if someone was willing to keep trying. And in the depths of space where legends were born, the last human was about to become something entirely new. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. 20-4 species in favor of granting Chen preliminary recognition as the founder of a new evolutionary branch, 21 opposed, and 2 abstentions. High Counselor Vaxtern's harmonics carried undertones of surprise as they announced the decision that would reshape galactic law. By majority vote, the Council grants Commander Zara Chen provisional status as the representative of a new evolutionary development designated as Neo-Human, pending completion of formal evaluation protocols. She is granted full freedom of movement and association during the evaluation period, which shall not exceed 1 galactic standard year. The hegemony delegation was on their feet immediately, Warlord Krexthel's cybernetic enhancements sparking with barely contained fury. "This precedent is dangerous beyond measure. You've legitimized the concept that any sufficiently advanced individual can claim species status and circumvent established protective protocols. The precedent, Captain Seth replied from the Coalition section, and that individual determination can overcome seemingly impossible circumstances. These are principles the galaxy needs to remember. Chen stood at the speaker's podium, feeling the weight of history settling around her shoulders. In the space of a few hours, she had gone from potential prisoner to the founding member of a new branch of human evolution. The irony was staggering, but the responsibility was even greater. "High Counselor," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "I accept the provisional recognition with gratitude, but I want to be clear about my intentions. I'm not seeking to establish a new empire or challenge existing political structures. I simply want the freedom to determine my own path, and perhaps to help others who find themselves in similarly impossible situations." Dr. Red-Eye Huentala approached the podium, her compound eyes reflecting with what might have been satisfaction. "Commander Chen, as part of the evaluation process, you'll need to demonstrate not just technological advancement, but cultural development. The Council will want evidence that neo-human civilization represents a genuine evolutionary step rather than mere individual adaptation." "What kind of evidence? Territorial establishment, population development, technological innovation, cultural achievement, and diplomatic capability? Essentially, you'll need to prove that you can build a functioning civilization from nothing." The magnitude of the challenge was breathtaking. Chen had survived 3 centuries alone in space, but now she was being asked to create an entire civilization, with herself as the only citizen. It was like being told to paint a masterpiece with a single brushstroke, to compose a symphony with one note. How exactly does one develop a population when there's only one member of the species? Chen asked, raising the obvious logical problem. "That," said High Counselor Vaxstern, "is one of the questions the evaluation process is designed to address. Historically, new species recognition has involved groups that separated from parent populations through biological or technological divergence. Your case is unprecedented." Warlord Krexthal seized the opportunity to highlight the impossibility of Chen's situation. "This demonstrates the absurdity of the Council's decision. She cannot meet the fundamental requirements for species recognition because she lacks the basic components of civilization: population, territory, and cultural continuity beyond the individual level." "Perhaps," said a new voice from the observer gallery, "the requirements need to be re-examined in light of new possibilities." The speaker was Ambassador Yethlara of the Synthesis Collective, a group consciousness species that existed as multiple linked individuals sharing a common identity. Their intervention was unexpected but immediately significant, as collective consciousness beings had unique insights into questions of population and identity. "Ambassador," High Counselor Vaxstern acknowledged, "the Synthesis Collective was not party to this debate, nor were we party to the original creation of recognition requirements that assumed all civilizations would follow traditional biological and social development patterns," Yethlara replied, their voice harmonizing in the complex tones that indicated multiple individuals speaking in unison. "Commander Chen represents something genuinely new, a civilization of one that has achieved technological advancement through extreme adaptation pressure." Chen listened to this exchange with growing understanding. Her situation was forcing the galaxy to confront fundamental assumptions about the nature of civilization, consciousness, and survival. Questions that had seemed settled for millennia were suddenly open for debate. "Ambassador Yethlara," Chen said, "what would you suggest as appropriate evaluation criteria for someone in my position?" The collective representative's form shimmered as multiple consciousness merged to formulate a response. "Demonstrate that your adaptations can be transmitted to others, that your innovations can form the basis for sustainable technological development, and that your cultural perspective offers something unique to galactic civilization. Prove that neo-human development represents evolution rather than merely individual survival." And how would one go about proving such things? By doing what humans have always done according to historical records, achieve the impossible through stubborn determination and innovative thinking. Captain Seth approached the podium, his reptilian features showing colors that indicated both excitement and concern. "Commander, The Coalition offers you full support during the evaluation period, including access to our research facilities, territorial claims for settlement establishment, and protection from any attempts at forced custody. In exchange for what? Chen asked, her military experience making her wary of offers that seemed too generous. Nothing immediate. Long-term, we hope that neo-human civilization might choose to affiliate with coalition principles rather than council consensus politics. But that's a decision for the future, not a condition of current support. Dr. Quintala stepped forward again, datapad in hand. Commander, I've been analyzing the technological innovations aboard the Endurance. The temporal field generator alone represents a breakthrough that could revolutionize interstellar travel and communications. Your reactor modifications show fusion efficiency improvements of approximately 40% over current standards. If you can document and transmit these innovations, you'll have demonstrated technological criterion fulfillment immediately. Chen felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. Dr. Quintala, those innovations were born of desperation and 3 centuries of gradual modification under extreme circumstances. I'm not sure they can be easily replicated or transmitted. That's exactly why they're so valuable, the expert replied. Innovations born of extreme necessity often represent breakthrough thinking that normal development processes never achieve. Your situation created conditions that no other civilization has experienced and survived. Warlord Krexthal interrupted the discussion with barely controlled anger. High Counselor, this conversation demonstrates the fundamental flaw in the Council's decision. You've granted recognition based on potential, rather than achievement. Hope, rather than evidence. This individual possesses dangerous technology developed under unknown conditions, and you're allowing her unrestricted access to galactic civilization. Dangerous technology? Chen's voice carried undertones that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Warlord, the only danger my technology represents is to those who prefer stagnation over innovation. The temporal field could revolutionize scientific research, emergency rescue operations, and long-distance exploration. The reactor modifications could make interstellar travel more efficient for every species in the galaxy. If you see danger in that, perhaps the problem lies in your perspective rather than my innovations. The exchange highlighted one of the fundamental tensions in galactic politics, the conflict between security and progress. Between the safety of known limitations and the risks of unlimited potential, Chen found herself at the center of a debate that had been simmering for decades. High Counselor Vaxtern employed their harmonic abilities to restore order before the discussion could devolve into open hostility. The evaluation period will provide opportunity to address all these concerns systematically. Commander Chen, you will be assigned a liaison team to assist with the formal requirements for civilization recognition. Dr. Quintala, you will serve as primary evaluator. The process will be documented for future precedent. As the assembly began to dissolve into smaller groups, Chen found herself surrounded by beings from dozens of species, all wanting to understand the implications of her recognition. But her attention was drawn to a small group of observers who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, representatives of endangered species who saw in her success a possible path for their own survival. A diminutive being with delicate features and translucent skin approached hesitantly. Commander Chen, I am researcher Plexton of the Fading Light Colony. My people number less than 10,000 and face extinction within the next century due to reproductive failure. Your recognition gives us hope that extinction is not inevitable. Chen studied the fragile being, seeing in their large eyes the same desperate hope that had driven her to activate the temporal field 3 centuries ago. Researcher Plexton, I hope my case can help your people, but you should understand that my situation was unique. I'm not sure the path I took can be replicated by others. Perhaps not replicated, said another voice, but adapted. The speaker was Dr. Korathan, of the Memory Keepers, a species that preserved the cultural heritage of extinct civilizations. Their approach carried the weight of deep thought and careful consideration. Commander, your survival demonstrates that extinction can be overcome through innovation and determination. Those are principles that can be taught and learned, even if the specific methods cannot be directly copied. Dr. Corathon, what are you suggesting? That neo-human civilization might serve not just as an example of individual survival, but as a teaching resource for other endangered species. Your experiences, innovations, and perspective could form the basis for a new approach to extinction prevention. Chen felt another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Her provisional recognition wasn't just about her own freedom, or even the establishment of a new civilization. It was about fundamentally changing how the galaxy approached the concept of extinction itself. That's, she paused, considering the implications, actually a fascinating possibility. Instead of accepting extinction as inevitable, endangered species could learn adaptive strategies and innovative approaches to survival. Captain Seth's scales shifted to colors indicating excitement. A school for the impossible, teaching species how to survive when survival shouldn't be possible. The Coalition would support such an endeavor completely. Even Dr. Quintala seemed intrigued by the concept. The research possibilities would be extraordinary. Comparative extinction survival strategies, adaptive innovation under pressure, the psychology of hope in impossible circumstances. Commander, you might be founding more than just a new species. You might be creating an entirely new field of study. Warlord Krexthal's objection was immediate and predictable. This proposal represents dangerous thinking that could destabilize established extinction management protocols. Some species are meant to fade gracefully rather than fighting desperately against inevitable fate. Says who? Chen replied sharply. Who decides which species deserve to survive and which should fade gracefully? That's exactly the kind of thinking that would have left me floating in space forever, a convenient example of why resistance is futile. The philosophical divide was stark and unbridgeable. The hegemony represented order through acceptance, the belief that stability came from recognizing limits and working within them. Chen represented something entirely different, the conviction that limits existed to be transcended, that impossible circumstances were challenges rather than verdicts. As the formal session ended and delegates began filing out, Chen realized that her long journey between the stars had led to something she never could have imagined. She wasn't just the last human or the first neo-human. She was becoming a symbol of hope for any being who refused to accept that extinction was final. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most important victories were won not by those who accepted their fate gracefully, but by those who stubbornly insisted that fate could be changed through determination, innovation, and the absolute refusal to surrender. In the depths of space where impossible things sometimes happened, the last human had become something entirely new. Proof that the end was not always the end, and that sometimes the greatest achievements came from those who were too stubborn to know when to quit. The evaluation period would determine whether Chen could build a civilization from nothing, but the real test had already begun. The question was not whether she could succeed, but whether the galaxy was ready for the changes that success would bring. 6 months into the evaluation period, the asteroid settlement that Chen had designated as New Haven bore little resemblance to the barren rock the Coalition had granted her as territorial claim. Where once there had been only stone and vacuum, now a gleaming complex of interconnected domes and towers reached toward the stars, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the light of 3 distant suns. But the most remarkable thing about New Haven wasn't its architecture or even its impossible construction timeline. It was the beings who now called it home. Dr. Quintala stood in the observation deck of the primary research facility, watching Chen work with a group of fading light colonists on modifications to their reproductive systems. The sight would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. A supposedly extinct human teaching a dying species how to adapt their own biology for survival. Yet here it was happening, documented by sensors that recorded every breakthrough and innovation. The population criterion, Quintala murmured to her recording device, appears to be fulfilled in a manner no one anticipated. Rather than reproducing biologically, neo-human civilization attracts individuals from other species who adopt its survival methodologies and cultural perspectives. Current population, 147 beings from 12 different species, all united by commitment to the principle that extinction is not inevitable. Chen looked up from the genetic modification chamber where researcher Plexton was undergoing the third phase of reproductive system enhancement. The process was dangerous and experimental, but it offered the fading light species their first real hope of avoiding extinction in over a century. Dr. W. Quintala, Chen called out, would you like to review the latest data? We've achieved a 63% success rate in reproductive viability restoration. The expert moved to the workstation, her compound eyes processing information at speeds that would have overwhelmed most organic minds. Remarkable! The approach bypasses traditional genetic therapy entirely in favor of cellular regeneration enhancement. How did you develop this methodology? Trial and error, mostly, Chen replied with the casual tone of someone discussing routine maintenance rather than breakthrough medical science. The temporal field work gave me insights into cellular-temporal relationships. When normal healing processes are too slow or damaged to function properly, you can sometimes accelerate them selectively. And the risk factors? Lower than extinction, Chen said simply. When you're facing the end of your entire species, even experimental procedures start looking reasonable. Plexton emerged from the modification chamber, their delicate features showing subtle changes that marked successful adaptation. Their voice carried harmonics of wonder and hope when they spoke. Commander Chen, preliminary scans suggest 74% probability of successful reproduction within the next cycle. My people might survive. Chen's smile carried the warmth that had attracted beings from across the galaxy to New Haven. Researcher Plexton, your people will survive, and then you'll help the next species that faces the same crisis. That's how this works. The philosophy behind New Haven was simple but revolutionary. Extinction was not an inevitable endpoint, but a challenge that could be overcome through innovation, determination, and mutual support. Species that joined the community didn't abandon their own cultures, but enhanced them with survival technologies and perspectives developed by Chen and her growing team of experts. Dr. D.H. Quintala moved to another section of the facility where a different project was underway. Here, beings from the Crystal Singers worked with Chen to develop new communication technologies that could preserve cultural heritage even if populations became critically small. The sight of a human teaching crystalline entities how to store memories in quantum matrices would have been science fiction 6 months ago. Cultural preservation and development criterion, Quintala noted, fulfilled through innovation rather than tradition. Neo-human culture appears to be defined not by specific practices, but by core principles: refusal to accept extinction, commitment to mutual support, and dedication to achieving the impossible through persistent effort. Captain Seth approached from the administrative complex, his scales showing colors that indicated satisfaction mixed with amazement. Dr. Quintala, you should see the latest reports from our diplomatic corps. 7 species have formally requested permission to send representatives to New Haven for consultation on survival strategies. The Synthesis Collective wants to establish a permanent research exchange. Even some core world governments are quietly inquiring about adaptive technologies. And the hegemony's response? Seth's colors shifted to something resembling grim amusement. Warlord Krexthal has filed 17 formal complaints about dangerous precedents and destabilizing influences. They're particularly upset about the reproductive enhancement program, claiming it violates natural evolutionary processes. Chen looked up from her work, her expression showing the steel that had kept her functioning through 3 centuries of solitude. Natural evolutionary processes would have let the fading light species die in 30 years. Unnatural evolutionary processes are giving them a chance to see their children grow up. I'll take unnatural over natural any day. The philosophical divide that had emerged during Chen's initial recognition hearing had only grown more pronounced as New Haven developed. The galaxy was being forced to choose between competing visions: the hegemony's ordered approach that accepted extinction as a natural part of cosmic cycles, and Chen's chaotic determination that every species deserved the chance to transcend their limitations. Dr. Corathan of the Memory Keepers approached the group. their forms shimmering with excitement. "Commander Chen, we've completed the analysis of the cultural transmission protocols you developed. The preservation rate for cultural knowledge is 97% compared to traditional methods that achieve at best 30% retention after population decline." "How does it work?" Quintala asked, her scientific curiosity overriding formal evaluation procedures. "General President is intended to enchant based on the presence to defend to maintaining and developing those traditions. We have Trust Teddy comes in. With Trust Teddy takes so many surprise. With Trust Teddy, culture becomes symbiotic rather than isolated. The implications were staggering. Cultural extinction had been considered even more inevitable than biological extinction. But Chen's approach suggested that knowledge and tradition could survive the death of their originating species by finding new homes among other peoples. "The Eternal Archive species has expressed interest in this approach," Corathon continued. "They've been trying to preserve the heritage of extinct civilizations for millennia, but their methods are purely academic. Your symbiotic model offers the possibility of keeping cultures genuinely alive rather than simply documented." Chen nodded, but her attention was drawn to an alert from the facility's communication array. "Dr. Quintala, I think you need to see this. We're receiving a signal from the outer system. Multiple ships, hegemony configuration." The observation deck's main display activated, showing tactical data that made everyone present tense with concern. 12 hegemony warships had entered the system and were taking positions that suggested blockade rather than diplomatic approach. Their intentions became clear when communications began arriving. Warlord Krextul's voice carried across the facility with unmistakable authority. "New Haven Settlement, this is Hegemony Fleet Command. By order of the Emergency Council for Galactic Stability, you are ordered to cease all experimental activities and submit to immediate inspection. Your operations have been classified as threats to established evolutionary processes." Chen's response was calm but carried undertones that suggested she had been expecting this confrontation. "Warlord Krexthal, New Haven is operating under Galactic Council recognition and Coalition protection. Your authority here is limited to observation unless you can demonstrate immediate threat to galactic security. Commander Chen, your activities constitute exactly such a threat. You are artificially extending the existence of species marked for natural extinction and disseminating dangerous technologies without proper oversight. This cannot be permitted to continue." The moment that everyone had been dreading had finally arrived. The hegemony was moving from legal challenges to direct action, forcing a confrontation that could reshape galactic politics permanently. Chen found herself at the center of a crisis that extended far beyond her individual survival. Dr. Searchy, Quintala stepped forward, her evaluation authority suddenly becoming critically important. "Warlord Krexthul, as official evaluator for Commander Chen's species recognition, I must protest any interference with the evaluation process." The Council granted a full year for assessment completion. "Dr. Quintala, your evaluation has been superseded by emergency protocols. The technologies and methods being developed at New Haven pose existential threats to galactic stability that override standard recognition procedures." Chen moved to the communication console, her movements precise and determined. "Captain Seth, what's the status of Coalition response forces?" 12 hours out at best speed," Seth replied grimly. "We have 6 ships in the area, but they're outgunned by current hegemony deployment." "Then we hold for 12 hours, Chen said simply. "Dr. Quintala, I need you to complete your evaluation immediately. If New Haven is going to survive this confrontation, we need official recognition before the shooting starts." "Commander, the evaluation criteria require demonstration of sustainable civilization development. You've exceeded requirements in every category, but formal documentation will take days to complete properly. Then we skip proper documentation and go with emergency certification," Chen replied. "Quintala, in your professional opinion, has neo-human civilization met the requirements for species recognition?" The expert looked around the facility, seeing beings from a dozen species working together to achieve the impossible, seeing technologies that could revolutionize galactic civilization, seeing proof that extinction was not inevitable for those with sufficient determination. Her decision would either legitimize Chen's approach or condemn it to destruction. Yes, Quintala said firmly. Neo-human civilization has not only met recognition requirements, but exceeded them in ways that suggest new evaluation criteria will be needed for future assessments. I formally certify completion of the evaluation process and recommend immediate full recognition. Warlord Krextul's response was immediate and predictable. Dr. Quintala, that certification is not valid under emergency protocols. Hegemony forces are authorized to take whatever action is necessary to prevent the spread of dangerous destabilization technologies. Chen activated the facility's defensive systems, energy shields rising around New Haven as weapon platforms emerged from concealed positions. But her primary response was not military, it was philosophical. Warlord, she said, her voice carrying across space to reach not just the hegemony fleet but any monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. You're right that what we're doing here is dangerous to galactic stability. We're proving that extinction is not inevitable, that impossible circumstances can be overcome, that beings who refuse to accept defeat can achieve things that make the universe a better place for everyone. If that's destabilizing, then maybe the current system needs to be destabilized. The confrontation that followed would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy was forced to choose between safety and possibility, between the comfort of accepted limitations and the chaos of unlimited potential. Chen had spent 3 centuries alone in space, refusing to accept that humanity was extinct. Now she stood at the center of New Haven, no longer alone, joined by beings from across the galaxy who shared her conviction that nothing was ever truly impossible for those stubborn enough to keep trying. The hegemony represented order, predictability, and the safety of accepting natural limits. Chen represented something entirely different, the human conviction that limits existed to be transcended, that extinction was a challenge rather than a verdict, and that sometimes the greatest achievements came from those who were too stubborn to know when to quit. As the two fleets faced each other across the void, the galaxy held its breath. The outcome would determine not just Chen's fate or even the survival of New Haven, but whether the future belonged to those who accepted the inevitable or those who refused to believe that anything was truly impossible. In the depths of space where legends were born and impossible things sometimes happened just often enough to keep hope alive, the last human was no longer alone. She was joined by allies who understood that sometimes the greatest victory was simply refusing to surrender, no matter what the odds. The age of human extinction was ending, not with resurrection, but with recognition that some things are too important to die, even when all hope seems lost. End.